dinosaurs, stay for the zombies. At least that's what the filmmakers are hoping in Jurassic Island, a 2022 movie, a low-budget British fare with the people behind this having lots of aliases. So the press release I have, the director is noted as Dominic Ellis, that's what it is on IMDb, but on the actual credits of the movie he's listed as Dominic Nutter. And this is produced by the person who is known as Scott Jeffrey and Rebecca Matthews. Scott Jeffrey, aka Scott Chambers, Rebecca Matthews, aka Becca Harani, Rebecca Matthews, and Rebecca Fletcher. So who knows who's really behind these movies, because you never can tell, all these pseudonyms and stuff. And this kind of is a low budget movie that is very akin to the classic works of Sir Arthur Doyle, in specific reference to The Lost World here. Obviously this is due to kind of come out to take advantage of the hype surrounding the large budget Jurassic World Dominion movie, which is also released this year. And with a lot of kind of Scott Jeffrey produced movies, we have a British movie which has British actors playing Americans with American accents to obviously appeal to an American audience. It has actually, it stars a couple of Scott Jeffrey regulars, Sarah T. Cohen, who plays our main character Ava. You've also got Nicola Wright, among others as well. And as I've mentioned, it's very similar in a way to The Lost World. It has this group of scientists travelling to this kind of remote island in search for Ava's father, who has kind of gone missing. And when they are there, they discover this island is home to dinosaurs. But not only that, there seems to be a virus on the island which is transmitted through these kind of leeches that turns people into 28 days later rage-style zombies. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Jurassic Island. Obviously this movie has a tiny budget, so you have to give some concessions in regards to the scale of the thing. But with that context in mind, what can we say that works in this movie's favour? It is very similar to The Lost World without being a direct adaptation. And you know, the Lost World is a classic for a reason. It is one of the kind of the best known kind of like works of kind of fiction of its era, and it's a classic bit of storytelling which has been adapted many times. And although this, like I said, isn't a direct adaptation, you do feel that the kind of the reference and the reverence there, and it does have that kind of somewhat of a sense of wonder where we have these hapless scientists discover these kind of like, you know, fantastical things that are kind of on this island. And I find it's always fun, you know, wondering how people kind of react to these kind of phenomena when they kind of see it. Admittedly, on this movie, it's a little bit downplayed, but I still kind of quite like that kind of classic kind of style of storytelling there. I have to say, there's some reasonably impressive B-roll on this movie. We get a lot of establishing shots and kind of location shooting and things like that to kind of add to this kind of faraway film atmosphere. And I think it does a good job of some well photographed kind of B footage to kind of like emphasize the isolation and the kind of the you know, how this island is meant to be kind of portrayed. I think it did a good job. The movie is reasonably well paced, I would say. We'll come on to how they've kind of expanded the story in a minute, but there are things here that kind of give the movie little jolts of excitement. And again, there are cost-cutting ways that they've kind of did this, i.e. the kind of the zombie kind of storyline. But it does give the story at least some kind of little bits of you know, action kind of sequences and kind of heightened drama, rather than just kind of having lots of kind of dialogue, which this movie still does, to be fair. But you know, to at least have some elements where it's a little bit more kind of you know, more going on. And the acting is a little bit of a mixed bag, but there are some reasonable performances here as well. Okay, so what doesn't work with this movie? Again, this is a very, very low budget movie. Let me just get the obvious thing out of the way first of all. The CGI in this movie is particularly kind of noticeably poor. It actually reminded me of, if you've ever played the PlayStation, the original PlayStation, it had a tech demo of a Tyrannosaur kind of walking along, which you could just like move around. The graphics of this movie kind of look like a comparison to that. So if you can imagine that pulled out and put in a movie of 2022, it kind of looks like that. I mean, we have seen other CGI dinosaurs. I mean, they did Dinosaur Hotel, variety of kind of monster films, where although the CGI wasn't brilliant, I do think it was better than this. Even the way these kind of dinosaurs move around, they just sort of seem like they're kind of being turned on a computer, which obviously they are. But the CGI for the dinosaurs here is particularly kind of noticeably of lower quality. The designs aren't as good, the movement isn't as good, things like this. The way they're attacked is that they're kind of like, the composite work here isn't particularly kind of good, where they've been kind of overlaid over kind of live action. So everything really involving the kind of the CGI kind of dinosaurs here is very kind of cheap, even for low budget B movie standards. It doesn't look particularly kind of impressive in any kind of shot, unfortunately. As I've mentioned, the main threat here isn't actually dinosaurs. In fact, the dinosaurs really don't play a major part in this movie, to be honest with you. They're just a thing to have in the movie to kind of to sell it against the Jurassic World franchise, really. But the real threat is this kind of this zombie virus, which is obviously a lot cheaper to do, because you can just kind of put people in kind of makeup and stuff like that and have just people chasing each other around looking like zombies. And although, like I've said, in the positives, it does mean that this movie is punctuated with more kind of action sequences that involve that, than rather than having just relied on the few and far between dinosaur kind of sequences that we get. It's probably not what people were wanting from a film like this. I mean, it ultimately feels more like a zombie film than anything else. It just happens to have a few dinosaurs kind of like strolling around, really. And I do think I will say, going back to a slight positive, the idea about these leeches kind of giving you an infection, it's an interesting one. But then they kind of like, someone gets bitten and they assume that they're going to turn when that hasn't been established. But there you go. So there's kind of like the continuity within the kind of the rules of this this infection. Just because we've seen zombie films and people tend to turn when they get bitten, we assume that this kind of style of infection is transmitted through bites, when we've not seen that. We've only ever seen these things transmitted through these leech infections and stuff. So there's kind of like, let's establish some rules here. But there is a lot of kind of like dialogue here. Again, to kind of like pad out the running time to kind of, make this kind of movie a feature length without having to kind of having the expensive things like this, the special effects and stuff like that. One quick positive again, actually. I will say that there is one reasonable practical effect here where someone is trying to cut off part of their body, and that did look actually fairly good also. That's the one kind of practical effect that they did. But on the other thing, again, CGI blood, there's a lot of obvious kind of CGI blood here. I know a lot of people aren't a huge kind of fan of this. The characterization of our kind of like our group of protagonists, you may have sort of had a group, a bunch of cardboard cutouts of this film, because no one really gets any kind of like characterization in this movie. I mean, again, it's a low budget film. They don't really waste too much time into trying to develop characters. Ava it's our main character, just seems like, she needs to be a strong female character. Therefore, she seems to be kind of like constantly angry and kind of threatening. But there's no real development of any actual real kind of characters. They just seem like one sort of character archetype, and then that's just basically it. And then the acting as well, as I've mentioned in the positives, you think of the original Jurassic Park when Sam Neill first sees the dinosaurs, how he kind of reacts. That's how people would probably react. But here, everything is just like, kind of a little bit nonchalant in regards to, seeing a real life dinosaur wandering around in the woods. It's very much like, not particularly good acting. Let me just put it politely for you. There are a couple of performances where I thought were better. I think Sarah Cohen doesn't do a bad accent. She's doing this American accent to appeal to American audiences. But she always seems like her voice is constantly kind of gravelly while she's trying to do it. I mean, I won't try and do an impression, but I don't know. I just noticed the kind of like the gravelly undertones he's trying to do here to try and make the American accent. But I will say that I have to say this American accent is probably better than some I've heard. But the acting, again, some of the characters, I'd say, are poorly written, and some of the acting performances, I'm not going to point out who specifically, aren't particularly. Even people who I think have done reasonable performances in other movies, I think this one particularly, the acting seems a little bit more subpar than maybe previous kind of performances. And the movie just has this dull, kind of quickly produced and turned around feel to it. I mean, nothing really seems particularly kind of well thought out. You know, that you could scratch holes at kind of logic here, you know, that how quickly our group of rescuers seem to get to this particular island, and are, you know, anyone who might be a survivor just seems to have just, you know, they don't seem to be malnourished, they seem to be perfectly clean and things like this. It's silly things, you know. Again, I could pick holes on little logic details all day with this, but I think, you know, with a B movie you have to expect a certain type of schlockiness. But so I'll just say there's lots of kind of you know, less than stellar writing, if you ask me. Again, this is a movie that was probably churned out relatively quickly to coincide with the Jurassic World Dominion movie. Overall, you know, I have to be honest with you, I think this one is a little dull, even for B-movie fans. It doesn't really seem particularly kind of original. It just seems to be very much kind of going through the motions, but with sort of poorly thought out ideas, and even for B-movie standards, subpar special effects. So I'll give this one a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.